Call meeting to order, Monday, August 5th, 2019, at 6 p.m. Our first order of business is invocation. Ms. Lyles.
Dear Lord, we come to you today just thanking you for this day, Lord. We thank you for the rain that we've had. We just ask that you be with each one of us during this meeting, that we would conduct ourselves in a way that would glorify you, and that everything that we do in this county would be to look out for each other, to help each other, Lord, and that we would think about the other person before we make any decisions. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Alex? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. Public comment, non-agenda. Mr. Kissler.
Good evening. For the record, Brad Kisker speaking on behalf of Brad Kisker. I'd like to thank all of the Planning Commission. I've been in a little bit of a hiatus and crawling out of the woodwork, but for all your work you're doing on the comprehensive plan, I know you all been putting in extra hours, going to meetings on your own time and getting the public really involved. And it seems like we're getting a lot of good feedback and a lot of things going into this. My wish of a smaller comprehensive plan doesn't seem like it's going to come to fruition, but and hopefully it's more readable than the one that we currently have. But I'm going to wait to judge on that. But I'm here mainly two things tonight. One is I haven't been paying attention to everything that you all been discussing over the last few months, so I may be speaking a little bit out of turn. But the first thing is I don't know if we brought Duke Energy into this conversation very much, and what's going to happen with the county one of these days. They just, I might not have all my facts and figures and dates correct, but if I'm correct, it was originally licensed in '74 for 40 years. It just went under, just got approved for another 20 years back in 2014. So for another 20 years, so that really means the clock is ticking quicker than we realize. And I didn't really realize that until I started asking some questions a few weeks ago. What is Duke going to do when this 20-year license is up, and we're already 4+ years into it or so, with Duke paying around 1/3 of the taxes for the county, with all the good jobs that come with the nuclear station, the high-paying jobs. If those would suddenly disappear, it's my opinion Duke's not going to go somewhere, but they could shut down the nuclear, and there's a lot of infrastructure over there that they're not going to give up probably, but I think we ought to bring Duke into this conversation with the comprehensive plan, because we're going to have to deal with it. And if Duke would leave, they're the ones that kind of, started this whole thing with Lake Kiwi and Jocassee and Toxaway and everything. It's going to be a big hit, for the income, for the taxes that come into this county. And so my 2 cents is we got to, maybe reach out to Duke, see if we can get somebody to come in and speak and see if they will talk about their long-range plans. If they, I'm sure they do have long-range plans. Whether they'll share them fully is another thing. But I think Duke needs to be a major player in some of this comprehensive plan. So, when the next one's due in 10 years, that we only have a few years left to deal with it. So I think we need to start dealing with it now. The second part is when I served, I asked the question twice, and probably more than that. But are we trying to grow this county? Or are we trying to keep the county the way it is? Part agricultural, retirement homes, and some economic development, and that kind of ties back into Duke. And if we're serious about economic development, bringing in higher paying jobs, courting the BorgWarners and their satellite companies to bring in higher paying jobs to support middle class housing. And we keep hearing about low-income housing, there's not enough entry-level housing, but we gotta have the jobs that pay more than, $7, $8, $9, $10 an hour for that housing. We live in a relatively hilly county, so development cost of raw land is high. So when you start out, price per lot is pretty high. It doesn't leave much for, an average quote starter home. So that's part of the problem why, we keep going back to why don't we have entry-level housing. And a lot of it just has to do with the terrain of this county. It's not flat, maybe out towards 85, but we've got farms out there. So I think that, again, there has to be a fundamental decision of, are we trying to increase, the population, or are we not? And there's not a right or wrong answer. I just think it needs to be discussed between Planning Commission and County Council, where we brought it up a couple times, and nobody's really given that straight answer. And again, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but in order to plan, which is your all's job now, thankfully, we need an answer. And to me, that would come from County Council. And you guys take and run with it there. But that's all I have. Thank you for your time and service. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
All right. We have two sets of minutes for approval. We have the minutes of the comprehensive plan outreach meeting in Fairfield Youth Center on 7/25/2019. So do I hear a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, we also have the minutes of the July 15th meeting, 2019. Motion?
I'll make a motion, approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any corrections, discussion about those minutes? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Now we're gonna move into, Mr. Adam.
Sir, we've had quite a few outreach meetings, and there's been a lot of talk about communication between the county and the cities. So if you all are interested in it, staff will recommend that this planning commission perhaps schedule some meetings with other planning commissions throughout the county, Seneca, Walhalla, Westminster, Salem, as they see fit, or other municipalities as well. So that's just a thought we had, was to kind of join forces, open a line of communication, and that's our thought regarding it. And it wouldn't be for any time before we got the comprehensive plan done, if you all were interested in doing it.
Okay, the floor is open for discussion. We don't have anyone signed up to speak about it. What do y'all think about that?
I think that's a great idea.
I think it's a great idea. When you go into our comprehensive plan, a lot of the agencies that are involved in making these decisions are these municipalities. So the closer we can work together, and that's been brought up several times in these focus meetings, is we need to be working together closer. And it'd be a great opportunity, I think, to do it.
We just don't need to forget the unincorporated parts of the counties and let the municipalities drown out the voices of the unincorporated, because we have way more people in the unincorporated parts of this county than we do in the municipalities.
Certainly.
So do we need a motion to direct you to set up the,
That would be most effective, motion to instruct staff to work with other planning commissions or the municipalities to set up some sort of joint planning commission meetings.
I'll make that motion.
got that motion? I'll second the motion. All right, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So now we move into the Highway 123 corridor plan. We have a couple people would like to speak. Mr. Brad? Excuse me.
Again, Brad Kisker speaking for Brad Kisker. on the 123 corridor plan, again, this has been coming up for quite some time, and basically some of that just stole my thunder, but, and I love the turnout tonight. We got a big turnout, so it's kind of exciting, so I don't know if that's good or bad, but got a lot of people here. So, but anyway, on 123, I think that, again, as Clemson continues to grow towards Seneca, and we brought this up a few years back, that, 123 is becoming more and more congested. And no matter what we do on 123, we can make it 20 lanes wide and get our traffic flowing great, but as soon as we hit that bridge down there, it goes down to 4 lanes, and it's not gonna get any wider. And I really think that, again, this may go back to county council and planning commission to get together, of establish some kind of communication, a board, an advisory committee or something to study, a long-term, how are we gonna deal with, basically getting through Clemson. And it's not so much Coney County growing, which it is, but it's Pickens County and Clemson growing towards us. And as the shops continue to open, the hotels open, the student housing open, I don't like to drive down there much anymore. And if you can make it through Clemson, and then you hit Easley, and I think they got somebody's got an interest in stoplights in Easley, because they just keep putting them up. But I think, between Coney County, Seneca, City of Clemson, Pickens County, some type of, again, long-range planning, and that's what we're here to do, of establishing, some type of committee to figure out how to get another route around Clemson, from Seneca, and that's probably going to entail a bridge over Hartwell, and that's going to take, 10, 20 years, but something's going to have to be done, because I think somebody in Clemson suggested a road over 123 through Clemson, and I don't think that's ever going to happen. But anyway, just, my 2 cents in it is, I think, again, somewhere in a comprehensive plan, establishing, again, I imagine you're going to sit down with county council at some point and throw that on the table to solve what is becoming an ever-increasing traffic issue, backup problems getting through Clemson, which is backing up into Coney County. So, again, no matter what we do is an overlay, corridor plan, what have you, it comes down to that 4-lane bridge. And I think that's a Coney County's bridge, if I'm not mistaken. Or is that
Yes, that is in Oconee
Yeah.
County.
But even if we can get that to 6
I think it's
lanes,
a state bridge.
I'm sorry?
It's a state highway.
I can't remember where the line is. It seems to me it's a Coney
Mine
County.
is on the Clemson side of the bridge.
Yeah, so anyway, but even there, and, going through, 123 through Clemson, they've gotten that about as wide as they can go. I know they're talking about putting in some barriers for non-turning lanes to speed traffic through there, but that, that's a Band-Aid in my opinion. So, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent. Mr. Blackstone?
This thing about 123 corridors and trying to limit the access and everything, I believe we have 100-foot right away from the center, isn't that correct? Is on each side, 100 foot from center, at least that much. And the state regulates curb cuts anymore, so I think what we're doing is sort of overlapping what the state is already doing. And I think the state's taking care of the curb cuts and everything else, and they've got enough right-of-way in there to offset anything at close. It won't be anywhere close to the highway, is with 100 foot from each side, on each side from the center of the road. They did that, and the purpose of that was if they wanted to, this fellow was talking about 6 lanes, they would have plenty of room to do that, plus they'd have plenty of right-of-way between that and the private property owners. So I really feel like that anything else would just be sort of messing with what's already set up by the state highway, and I don't think it's necessary. And, being a property owner, I feel like that a lot of times we have to come up here. I've been in real estate and developed a lot of property, and we helped add a lot of taxes to our county tax books. Of course, they give industry all these tax credits. We get nothing but harassment a lot of times, trying to tell us what we can do with our property. And I think we need to get back to the point of respecting people's private property rights. And I feel like that anything further than what the state already does is useless. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Tom?
Good evening. For the record, I'm Tom Markovich. Speaking for Tom Markovich. I read pretty closely the plan for 123, and I thought it was interesting in some ways in how it's, in terms of this particular corridor plan, is viewed as a road between Clemson and Seneca, but in reality, 123 is a road that was developed a long time ago to streamline traffic along a whole corridor and not just between Seneca and Clemson. And now, that doesn't mean that development it does seem to follow, when we try to streamline traffic and do different things. I mean, development has a tendency to follow along. There's a whole lot of warm and fuzzy stuff in the 123 corridor plan that makes people feel good, but as far as actually moving traffic, I don't see a single thing there that's going to improve moving traffic. And as Mr. Blackson has already said, I mean, there's very specific things that are in state law that are already laid out for road access and property access from a state road. And I don't care what the highway department says, state law is state law. And it's not very easy I've never seen a situation where the county can actually change state law. I mean, they can try to get a law changed, but as far as actually being able to override state law, I've never seen it happen. So, and another thing, I'm kind of chiming in on what Brad was saying a minute ago. There is no higher priority in trying, the traffic between, that gets blockaded at Clemson. I mean, if we don't start right now to find a bypass route, there is going to have to be, because just as Brad said, it'll take 10 to 20 years. I can't imagine what the traffic's going to be like in another 10 to 20 years. We don't have that long to wait, and it takes forever to get these projects done. To me, that has to be a higher priority than anything else when we look at the traffic and how we get between here and to the other side of Clemson. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, at this time, we'll turn it over to Alta Planning and Design. Captain.
Good evening. Thank you so much for inviting me back to present this on the final Highway 123 corridor study. My name is Kat Maines. I'm with Alta Planning and Design at our Atlanta office, and led the charrette process that was back in March here, and was just really overwhelmed with all of the great input that we got from the community members here. So just want to say that once again, to thank you all for your really thoughtful input on this plan. So we submitted this final plan over the summer that kind of summed up everything that we did during the charrette and gives you all sort of a roadmap to move forward with Highway 123. I'm going to start with a quote that sort of inspires how we led the charrette. Leading innovation is not about getting people to follow you into the future. It is about getting people to co-create with you. So that was really our goal for the charrette, was to really get everybody in the same room and get some genuine conversation about Highway 123 and its role in the county. So a little bit of information about the corridor we were looking at in particular. At Highway 123, it's been mentioned it's a state and U.S. highway route. It was about 5 miles connecting from the eastern city limits of Seneca to the eastern city limits of Oconee County itself at Lake Hartwell. So, you know, as some of the commenters mentioned, it is the kind of the connector between these two places, but it has also started to become a place on its own as more development has started cropping up. We see a lot of opportunities along the corridor. The first being that it's a big growth area for the county. There's several parcels currently under development. This image shows the recently closed permits as of March 2019. And this one shows that the open permits as of March 2019. So you can see there's a lot of parcels with construction going on. It's also the point of entry and exit for Oconee County. So it's the first place that people get a sense of what Oconee County is when they drive over from Clemson. We also saw 2 utility easements that run more or less parallel to Highway 123. We've seen in our work a lot of examples of utility corridors becoming viable greenways, shared use paths. So this could be an opportunity for the corridor. And there's also a wide right-of-way. As one of the commenters noted, there's plenty of right-of-way on either side, so there's a lot of space to work with. And there's also several healthy food options along the corridor, so it gives people access to their daily needs at convenience stores and grocery stores. That being said, there's some constraints as well. We talked about, you know, there's a wide right-of-way, but there's really only one mode of travel that's supported on the corridor right now. So it's working really well for people who want to drive, but not as well for people who want to make other travel choices. Safety is also a concern here. You know, we have heard a lot from community members during the charrette about the fact that there's 2 through lanes there, but there's also a lot of people now turning on and off of Highway 123 to try to access the development on either side. So a lot of concerns about, you know, stopped buses, stopping to pick someone up, or someone slowing down to turn right. There's also a lot of environmentally sensitive areas around here. Topography is challenging along this corridor, so while they do have the right-of-way available for roadway expansion, it would be costly in some of these areas where you have a steep drop-off next to the road. And there's also Clemson game day traffic that we understand is a concern for community members. It's one of the main routes that people use to get to and from games. So while this is only a handful of times per year, it is definitely a concern. There's also a railroad that runs parallel along several segments of the roadway that makes it difficult to add turns on and off the corridor for people who are on the other side of that railroad to access Highway 123. There's also a lot of plans that have been done previously that kind of helped us understand the corridor and understand the context. The previous comprehensive plan of 2010 highlighted the major development projects in the county, and you can see several of them are along the study corridor highlighted in the red box in the slide. It also mentions 3 major goals that we think are really prevalent in this project. Working to upgrade the road system in a manner that provides safe and efficient routes through the county while limiting the negative impacts on sensitive areas. Support the expansion of mass transit in Oconee County. It is a transit corridor, so that's a consideration here. And encouraging the expansion of bicycle and pedestrian routes in areas appropriate. As we mentioned previously, there are no facilities currently for people walking and biking, so there's an opportunity to address that here. This map shows the population change, 2000 to 2010. This is from that 2019 comprehensive plan update draft. You can see a lot of the growth in the county is concentrated in the Highway 123 corridor. So how do we deal with that growth? these two maps, the one on the left shows the median household income by census tract. You can see that it's a relatively higher income to the north and lower income to the south of the Highway 123 corridor. And then the map on the right shows the minority population by census tract. So we do have a higher concentration of minority populations here. These two groups tend to be more reliant on walking and biking facilities and more vulnerable to unsafe roadway conditions. There was also an internal study done that looked at collision and fatality data, and Highway 123 was one of the identified high crash corridors from that study. This map shows the fatal collisions, and this one kind of shows a heat map of all of the collisions. So you can see Highway 123 pops out on this map. There's also the Destination Oconee report from 2016 that sort of charts a character and signage program forward. We think there's a lot of elements where this could be implemented jointly with some of the Highway 123 recommendations. And our design process for this was largely based on a collaborative process, the charrette that happened in March 2019. We're now at the end of that process. We're in August 2019. Planning report is complete. The workshop that we did in March was a 3-day workshop that included 3 days of public meetings. So we had 2 days of open studio where the public could come and chat, and they definitely did. We had some field work that we did. These photos here are from some of our meetings that we had. Our commission presentations and workshop where we had large format maps and asked people to identify the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats along the corridor. And in terms of who we heard from, we had a steering committee with Oconee County staff, county council members, planning commissioners. South Carolina DOT was there, so they definitely were aware of the project and had a lot of good feedback about how the county could work with the DOT in terms of implementing their goals. CAT Bus was also there, so we talked a lot about the transit operations on the road. Oconee County Economic Alliance and the City of Clemson. We also had several members of the public contribute to the meetings and the workshops. From the steering committee, some of the themes we heard were easy access between Seneca and Clemson. Safety is a priority on the corridor. That there are too many curb cuts and driveways. Decelerating and stopped vehicles in the right lane cause safety concerns, and that they'd like to see more multimodal options for people walking, biking, and formalized bus stops. And we also asked people what their big ideas were, trying to generate some ideas that were more long-term thinking. People thought maybe traffic circles, elevated crossings, express, local, and HOV lanes for different uses were brought up, and transit lanes in the median. From the Planning Commission and the public, we had one workshop after the Planning Commission meeting that we did during that trip. Some of the themes we heard were beautification, that it's the shortest trip between Seneca and Clemson, so that was reinforced from our steering committee presentation. We heard desire for more right turn lanes to make it easier to access the destinations along the corridor. Lots of questions about the development and the growth and how the road could manage all of that. Concerns about speeding. Again, the bus stops were a concern. And in terms of the big ideas, people brought up water taxis, elevated crossings for people walking and biking, a bypass, and no left turns except lights, and even flying cars as a solution. Overall, the desired outcomes based on the input we got were that Oconee County maintains and strengthens its identity as a rural natural place, that it's easy to travel between Seneca and Clemson, that people feel safe using Highway 123, that it's easy to access the businesses and neighborhoods along Highway 123, and that people have several viable options of how to travel between Seneca and Clemson. So, how do we accomplish those things? We came up with infrastructure recommendations that would help support those goals, and kind of, they fall into these major categories that you see here: some corridor-wide improvements, potential bus stop locations where there's really popular bus stop pickup drop-off currently, frontage roads with new development, walking and biking bridge across Lake Hartwell, gateway treatments, a walking and biking tunnel under the railroad, and a greenway along that utility corridor. So in terms of our corridor-wide improvements, we're showing here some beautification, more intentional landscaping in the median and on the edges of the road, and a new separated path that would offer transportation options for people who are interested in walking and biking. We've talked a lot about safety and about options for people on foot or bike and concerns with the new growth, and we see this as an opportunity to really grow the corridor in a way that maintains its natural environment and does not have to impact more of the environmentally sensitive areas. We collected some precedents for that. This is one example from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, on another U.S. state route, a side path example. So there is precedent for doing this on South Carolina DOT roads. Also the Swamp Rabbit Trail along US 276 in Travelers Rest, South Carolina. We also see there's opportunity for some spot treatments where there's operational concerns currently, so right turn lanes that would help people get in and out of development easier without causing a hazard in the roadway. And where there's more intensive development occurring, you could consider doing frontage roads in front of that development that consolidates the entrance points along the road into one or two main locations rather than having a curb cut for each location. One of the things we heard a lot from you all is that, you didn't want to become that section of Highway 123 that's over in Clemson. You don't want it to be this commercialized kind of corridor, and, we see this as a way that you could keep that road maintained through access between Seneca and Clemson, and also deal with the development that's occurring on the road there. This is an example from Germantown, Tennessee, where they did an access road concept. This is obviously more urban than your context, but kind of operationally similar. And another example from Winter Springs, Florida, where you have that access road and the parking, and then everything is consolidated by use on either side. We also looked at connections to Clemson. Oconee County relies heavily on bridges for regional connectivity because it's almost completely surrounded by water. And the Highway 123 bridge across Lake Hartwell to Clemson currently lacks accommodations for people on foot or bike. A multimodal connection would provide transportation options other than driving, potentially relieving the congestion on the roadway itself. We understand you have this large student housing development, Epic, just on the other side of Lake Hartwell, and so we want to provide opportunities for people to get over to campus without necessarily having to get in their car and add another roadway trip to that road. We also see that the gateway into the city of Seneca as an opportunity. You have this railroad bridge and kind of a small welcome to Seneca sign currently. We see that this could potentially become a larger sign using some of those recommendations from the Destination Oconee report, and you could beautify that railroad bridge by putting on some lightweight cladding that wouldn't require any structural changes to that railroad bridge. Another idea that came out of this a lot of talk about that Epic development where the students live and the commercial development that's happened on the opposite side of Highway 123. We understand that initially Epic did study doing a roadway bridge underneath the railroad here, but that it wasn't feasible due to the amount of structural reinforcement that would have to happen on that rail. But a bicycle and pedestrian tunnel would be less structure intensive, and we think is potentially, it's worth looking at the feasibility of it and getting it on the list as a long-term investment. There's lots of recent and ongoing development in this area, and we see based on where that's happening, that that's not gonna stop. So in terms of trying to manage that development and to mitigate the impact on the roadway, we think this could be a great way to do that. And then the next big idea that came out was this utility corridor greenway. There's Duke Energy easements back here, and there's lots of precedent in South Carolina for them using those corridors for shared use paths, in particular in Greenville, South Carolina. So what is currently just a unused power easement corridor could potentially be opened up for shared use path access as well as for utility access. I will say we've also been in touch with Duke Energy about this project already, and they were very responsive. They were open to it and, unable to really comment at this point on the project, on the feasibility of it, but are totally in agreement that they would review plans and provide feedback once the county is able to get a little bit further with the concept. And again, there's lots of precedent for this. This is the West Ashley Greenway in South Carolina that uses a power easement corridor. And that is the end of the presentation. So I will be doing questions now. Yes, so we'll take all your questions.
I have a couple questions. Actually, I have about 3 or 4. I'm on page 26 down here, your implementation strategy. And I'm looking through that pretty carefully. How did you select these items? Was it from input from the public or a combination of your expertise? Can you tell me that?
Yeah, I will say they were largely based on the community input. We came in with a bit of an understanding of the technical conditions on the roadway, but these projects are really responding to the public input that we got.
And are they listed in priority? I know you've got a timeline here, but are they listed in any priority other than the timeline?
No, they're not listed in order of priority.
All right, I know I'm fascinated with the tunnel concept. Can you give me a guesstimate of what you think the usage of something like that would be? It'd be terrible to bore a hole under that thing and then not have many people going underneath it.
Yeah. Well, we didn't do estimates specifically for this project, but there are tools out there. The Association for Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals has a spreadsheet that's publicly available that you can use to estimate total number of trips generated for walking and biking for commercial and mixed-use developments. So you could take, the Epic development and the commercial shopping center that were recently built across the street and use those two developments to kind of estimate how many total walking and biking trips that they generate and use that as a proxy.
Did you look at an elevated crossing over the railroad and continuing across over 123 to the other side so that you didn't have to stop traffic as people walk back and forth? Did you look at that concept?
We did not. We did look a little bit into it, but it was quickly determined that it would be levels of magnitude more expensive than the tunnel because of the way the grade is there. The grade is much more favorable to a tunnel, so it would be, maybe a quarter of the total length of tunnel as you would need for an elevated crossing.
I don't know how many of us up here have been through that Hart's Cove and seen what the size of that epic village down there, but you really need to. I mean, it's massive. There's going to be a lot of people going back and forth, so it's going to be not only a traffic concern, but a safety concern, too. Well done. Thank you.
Anybody else? I'd like to thank you for all the work you've done. It's a good plan. It's something we will have to bring before the council and let them decide what they would like to do, or is implementation, or not. But it is good work, and it's actually what we asked for, so I applaud you.
Good, thank you so much. Thank you for inviting us to work with you all. It was a fun project.
I do have one other question. When you've done this with other counties before, have you also then worked with them on how to best implement, whether that be in what priority steps or in funding or in looking this direction or that direction? Have you assisted with that with councils?
Yeah, so generally what would happen in past experience, you would take one of these ideas, one of these infrastructure projects or one of the policy projects, and do a feasibility study around that to sort of look in more detailed, look at a finer scale at how the design would work and get more of the stakeholders on board and then take things from there.
When you looked at the tunnel under the railroad, did you look at a tunnel under 123 as well?
We did not. Part of the reason being that, again, it was based on the grade. So the grade is pretty favorable there to just kind of poking right through that raised rail bed. And then the second reason why we did this instead was because there's actually already pedestrian accommodations at that intersection, even though there aren't pedestrian sidewalks on either side. When they redid that intersection for Hart's Cove, they put in ADA ramps with tactile domes and pedestrian signal heads as part of that signal. So that's a large part of that cost that the county maybe would have been on the hook for, but since it was already there, we directed people to that crossing.
123 is an unsafe environment as it is, but we're going to put pedestrians on it, crossing it? That doesn't make sense to me.
Well, ironically, that is actually, I mean, the fact that they have accommodations right there currently, it's just a matter of getting people safely to that and then across it. When we talked about the tunnel, we also talked about how it would tie in with that side path, that shared use path configuration. So overall, the goal is to try to make it a safer environment, and rather than just saying, oh, it's unsafe, so we shouldn't do it, because there's no alternative.
Right, but we don't want to safely move them out of the development onto the road. If we can't safely move them over the road, then safely moving them out of the development is useless.
I mean, that's a red light and a crosswalk that's
But there's
already
no
put there.
sidewalk on the other side.
It goes right
Right
into
into
the
the village.
development right there.
It goes right into the development. They don't need a sidewalk. They just walk down into where the stores are. I mean, I agree, it should be something there.
Right, because we're just going to
make it
back up
safer.
traffic that much more if we're walking these people across the street.
Well, it would be, it would be actuated by users, so you don't necessarily have to keep traffic stopped unless there's somebody waiting to cross. This light also already is changing because there's a road there too, so vehicles are coming out here, so you could just integrate the pedestrian signal into that. And if you see in this image, the sidewalk that's on the near side of this image is actually there currently. So there is a landing space and a sidewalk connection into the development. It just doesn't continue down Highway 123.
The other element that's not discussed on this part is that while that traffic light might be longer and as pedestrians cross, every pedestrian that's crossing is not in a car getting to that location, which is what's happening now.
And that age group would be more than willing to go ahead and walk and ride a bicycle.
I think any age group is,
Yeah.
when you look anywhere, is more willing to do
You
that.
can't park on the Clemson campus anymore. You're hunting around forever.
Right.
Yeah, there's no easy answer to it, but
And generally, I think we want to keep the connections as direct as possible. You know, pedestrians really don't want to go out of their way or be in a long, dark tunnel where they don't feel safe. So, you know, oftentimes we see these very expensive, long overpasses or tunnels built, but if it's not the most direct way to get there, people don't end up using it and they end up making unsafe choices. So I think it's about finding that direct route, that desire line for pedestrians, and then enhancing that so it's safer for them.
But we put all this money into this tunnel just to get them to this one development, that's it.
Well, I admit that you would want it to be part of a broader network. So I think this is not the base recommendation. I think building sidewalks and side paths along the corridor would probably be a shorter term priority. And then you would do this to enhance that walking.
I guess I was looking for that from y'all.
Okay, yes.
What order we're supposed to do this in for it to work.
Yes.
Because if we do it out of order, then it's not gonna work. And I guess I was expecting that in your presentation is, okay, if you need to do this part, then you do this part, then you do this part.
Yeah, some of it, I will admit, is opportunistic. So, you know, you could implement that shared use path with developers as the corridor organically starts to develop. And you could get a lot of that shared use path in that way. I was just talking to one of our Georgia clients recently about this, and he was talking about how 15 years ago there was one person that insisted developers build short stretches of sidewalk where they develop, and it didn't seem like useful. But now 15 years later, they only have very small segments to fill in between. So you can kind of think about it in terms of being opportunistic with the implementation, in addition to pushing these larger items like a tunnel or the bridge across Lake Hartwell.
Well, it looks like the utility corridor, Greenway is on that side of 123. So potentially it could run into that tunnel at some point down the road.
Exactly, yeah, that would be a great.
And then beyond that development, it could stretch on to Clemson, which would be the hope, is to get some of this traffic to be pedestrian traffic rather than automobile traffic getting from point A to point B. Bicycle traffic or whatever.
Well, I think this tunnel would be a benefit only if we had a pedestrian bicycle place to go across the lake.
Right.
But
Yeah, it would almost have to be one with the other.
it all kind of ties together. But I don't think you can do really one without doing at least part of the others.
I think this has really shown a good reason for having a planning commission with foresight, because this could have been a real prime opportunity to say, okay, if you are going to develop in that area, you're going to also help us fund this, because it's going to obviously drive more traffic to your area.
Okay, what do you need at this point, Adam?
If you all are still talking, or, that's my question.
You need a vote.
If you all would like to recommend to send this to council as your recommendation, you certainly may. You should make a motion to that effect, and vote. Or if you all would like to do something else, you can do that as well. But this is this is the final iteration of the plan at the moment. We can always talk about it some more if you like.
Okay, what is the will of commission?
Go ahead, young man.
I was going to say, I like the work that's been done. I like the presentation. I think we do need to let county council know what has come of what we've done thus far. I also think it's our responsibility, though, before saying, ooh, county council, we want this Christmas list, that we do more work from our end on getting to that next step. But I think the county council needs to see what work they've invested in thus far.
I think before we send it to them, we do need that prioritization list and how we think this can be implemented. Like Alex said, this needs to go with this. We'll need funding for these first before we go to this. I think we need a little more information for them.
Well, Adam, I think Adam is gonna talk with the individual council and give them the same thing we have here, and then we can make changes to whatever we need, what we think, and then at that point, we can send everything to them, but they'll get the basic like we have right here. And I think he's gonna do that individually with each council member or two of
I
them.
can certainly do that for sure. But I guess the question is, do you all want to, if you don't want to send this along to county council at the moment, that's completely up to you. The question then becomes what we're going to do, because Alta at this point has, I believe, fulfilled the deliverable at the moment. This is their.
They fulfilled their contract?
I think they fulfilled their contract on what we asked for originally, was the plan itself, but we do have some things that the prioritization of the implement strategy and things that we can do, but as far as Alta, they did what we asked, I think so. So do we need to just say that we agree or we approve of the plan, or what do you need?
You have it, I mean, that's,
Just say
the
we'll-
question is what you want to do with it. If y'all want to hold off and do some prioritization of it, that's certainly up to you all. We can bring it up at the next meeting, or what you all would like to do with it. So that's the thing. We have the plan, we've accepted it, and that's.
Go ahead.
young
Oh.
Mike.
Okay, so we've got this really great presentation, nice pictures, lots of color, lots of detail. I do think that we need to send something to council to say, hey, this is what money has been invested in, this is what we've gotten from it thus far. The next step, though, I think, is for planning commission to make sure that this gets put into, if we're gonna do anything with it at all, puts into the comprehensive plan as a next step, whatever that next step is. It may be forming a commission or coalition to pull the stakeholders together. I mean, just the first picture alone with a crosswalk across the bridge, Clemson is needs to be just as excited about this as anybody, because this is gonna lighten their traffic. So there's a lot of people, even outside the county, that should be potential stakeholders that need to come together if some of this is to be implemented, because again, it's benefiting them as much as it benefits us, if not more, because this is 5 miles of our entire county. But it impacts Clemson greatly as far as the amount of auto traffic that's coming across their streets. So I think we need to send this to council and just say, look at what we're working on. It needs to be put in the comprehensive plan as let's see how to take the next steps. And then, whether that be a separate committee or whatever happens down the road with whatever group deals with this, that they then start getting the investors, that they then start getting the stakeholders involved.
Well, yeah, I think it should go to the county council and then say we're working on it. And if we put this, you're gonna put this totally in the comprehensive plan, or are we gonna come up with a separate recommendation that goes to the county council that might be a little bit quicker than waiting for the comprehensive plan to come out?
I don't see this as a quick application on any of it.
No, not.
But I do see it as a way to start relieving some traffic.
Everybody will agree with that, but I'm afraid this might get lost in the comprehensive plan. This is not going to be a 50-page document. It's going to be pretty fat.
I agree with old Mike there.
It's going to get lost.
I think it should be its own separate, but I don't think it should be excluded from the plan, but I certainly think it needs to be a separate.
I mean, it can be woven in the plan in there, there's no doubt about that, but I just kind of think maybe this needs to be another item on our agenda list as well as a comprehensive plan. Another item that we deal with somehow or another.
Should we send it to council and ask them if they have any input as far as prioritization in these
That's
strategies?
not a bad idea.
And then we can look at it again and.
Or objection in moving it forward, whether that be through the plan or through coming up with some,
Because I think all of these will need feasibility studies, right? I mean, none of those are gonna be done
Like that.
by, just an approval.
They would just write a letter to them and say, here's the plan, you got any
Get
comments?
started.
Get started.
Okay, so we need a motion to
You there?
send it forward and, with their input on implementation, correct?
For any feedback, yes.
Any
we
feedback
can
on it.
ask for the council's feedback on this plan and work with them on it.
and I don't think we should say implementation, because I think saying, hey, here it is, write us a check is the complete wrong way to go about this.
Right. But their input on prioritizing,
Yeah.
what needs to be done, what they think needs to be done. So do I have that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Okay,
I'll second the motion.
so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? You good, Sam?
Yes, we're just asking them to look at it,
Right,
right?
we're just letting them look at it and say, give
good
us
with
your
that.
ideas on what you
Okay.
think. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. And all those in favor say aye. Opposed? Okay. Now, so that's the point we're gonna do with this right now. We may wanna bring it back up on our agenda for us to look at as well.
Okay.
So we'll get with you and when we make the agenda. All right. First of all, I'd like to say thank you. You did a great job. I'd like to thank everyone. This is the biggest crowd we've had. Sorry that Adam told y'all a story about the barbecue.
It's coming later.
It's coming later. Is there any old business? Any new business? Okay, do I hear a motion to adjourn? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, thank you guys.
Well,